Toyota shouldn't be the largest car company in the world, and yet almost every serious manufacturer on the planet has tried to figure out why, but most of them failed. They implemented the same tools and processes, yet the gap barely moved. So, why didn't it work for Ford when they sent engineers directly into Toyota's factories, or for GM when they entered a full joint venture, specifically to watch Toyota's system operate from the inside? The question is why it worked for Toyota, and here's where it gets strange. The answer starts somewhere nobody expects. Somewhere that has nothing to do with cars or factories, and once you see how it connects, the whole thing clicks. To understand what Toyota actually built, you have to go back to late 1800s Japan, because this story doesn't start with cars at all. Japan was industrializing fast with textiles at the center of it. Japan was trying to catch up to the West, fast. Silk and cotton were Japan's biggest exports, and textile factories were the main source of industrial income. There's one small problem that quietly breaks everything. Early looms had a brutal flaw. When a thread snapped, a loom kept going. And this sounds small, but this is where millions of dollars start disappearing and nobody could stop it. When automated looms were invented, things were supposed to be better. But when a thread broke in a machine, the machine would continue weaving and the defects compounded quickly. To put this into perspective, a medium-sized mill produced 10,000 meters of fabric per day, and each factory had the potential to lose $10,000 to $40,000 per day. A total loss of a potential $3.6 to $14.4 million a year. And again, that's just one factory. People treated this loss as the cost of scaling and automation, even though you'd think millions of dollars would be worth solving. So much money was being wasted at a time when Japan was trying to catch up to the world, until one person looked at it differently. Sakichi Toyota was born in a rural village in 1867, right after Japan opened to the world. He was a carpenter's son with no formal engineering training. He started as a kid watching his mom struggle with a machine, the loom, that just wasn't good enough. For decades, he experiments, fails, and tries again. For a lot of people, this could have led nowhere. In 1924, he gets there. He builds a loom that stops itself when a thread's broken. The machine catches the failure and refuses to continue. And what that does next is what changes everything. This was not trivial. Again, we are talking in millions of dollars per factory yearly that could be saved. Stopping the defects before it compounded was revolutionary and extremely effective. So effective that by 1929, manufacturers wanted the patent badly enough to pay serious money. So the Toyota family sold the patent for £100,000 to the Platt brothers, roughly $7 to $10 million in today's money. But selling the patent should sound strange. You don't sell the thing that works unless you've already seen something that makes it feel small. Kiichiro Toyota, Sakichi's son, had been watching America. Ford's assembly lines, mass production. The idea that a car wasn't a luxury, it was something ordinary people could own and depend on. He could see where manufacturing was heading. They take everything they earned and walk into an industry they know almost nothing about. No expertise, experience, or reason to think this would work. This is where it should have fallen apart, and then it gets worse. The war ends, Japan loses, and the economy doesn't just slow down, it collapses. Industrial production falls off a cliff. The country is trying to rebuild from nothing. Toyota is drowning. By 1949, the company is hemorrhaging money. Sales dried up and debt piled faster than they could manage. The company that was supposed to be Japan's answer to Ford is weeks away from disappearing entirely. So they do the only thing they can. They start cutting. Mass layoffs, thousands of workers gone, and the ones who stay go on strike. The factory floor turns into a war zone. The company Kiichiro built, the one his father's patent funded, is tearing itself apart from the inside. Kiichiro Toyota resigns. The founder's son, gone, takes personal responsibility for a crisis he couldn't stop. The company survives, but barely. Not because Toyota earned it, because there was no other option. What comes out the other side is a company with almost nothing left. No margin, no buffer, no room for a single mistake. And that changes everything. When you can't afford waste, you stop tolerating it. When you can't afford a defect to travel, you stop it the moment it appears. When every problem costs more than you have, you build a system that catches problems before they compound. Necessity didn't inspire Toyota's philosophy, it forced it. And from that point on, everything they built had to follow that rule. So they studied American cars. The Toyota AA and the Ford Model A were very similar. Engines and layouts were heavily influenced by Ford and Chevrolet. They didn't innovate, they refined. And that sounds like a weakness, but it becomes their biggest advantage. There's a Japanese word, Kaizen, which just meant change for the better, but at Toyota, it became something else. But to understand what that system actually became, you have to meet one more person. Taiichi Ono is a production engineer at Toyota in the years after the war. Not a visionary, not a founder, just someone who kept returning to the same problem. Think about what a factory floor actually looks like. A car moves through dozens of stages. Metal shaped, welded, assembled, painted, fitted. Each stage builds on the last. If something goes wrong early, a misaligned part, a flawed weld, it doesn't stop there. It moves forward, gets built over, gets buried. A flaw that takes 30 seconds to fix at the source might take 3 hours 4 stages later. Because now you have to undo everything built on top of it. Most factories accepted this as inevitable. Ono couldn't, and this is the moment everything shifts, because the answer already existed. Sakichi Toyota had built it into a loom in 1924. Stop the system the moment something goes wrong. Don't let defects travel. Force every problem to be solved at the source before anything moves further. This becomes one of the 2 pillars of the Toyota production system. The other is just-in-time manufacturing. Parts arriving exactly when needed, no excess inventory, no buffer stock hiding inefficiency. Together, they're not just manufacturing techniques, they're a different answer to a question most companies never asked. Not how do we produce more and how do we make problems impossible to hide. Picture yourself on a Toyota assembly line. One person in a facility producing thousands of cars. The line is moving and every minute of downtime costs real money. And you notice something. A panel that doesn't sit right. Sound that shouldn't be there. Something small. Something that might be nothing. There's a cord above you. Pull it and the entire line stops and every eye turns towards you. Or you let it go. Trust that someone downstream will catch it. In almost every factory in the world, you let it go. Likely because of pressure. The culture makes clear that keeping the line moving is the priority. So workers learn without anyone saying it directly that letting a problem through is safer than causing a stoppage. That's how defects travel, stage by stage, buried under more work until they reach the customer. At Toyota, not pulling the cord is the mistake. Stopping isn't a disruption, it's the entire point. Now multiply that across every worker, every line, every facility, every day. Every problem caught at the source is one fewer defect buried downstream. One fewer fault making it into a car someone drives for the next 10 years. Over millions of cars across decades, that accumulates into something measurable. And this is where it all connects. This is why Toyota vehicles consistently rank at the top of long-term reliability studies. Not because their engineers are smarter, not because the materials are different, but because the system catches problems before they travel. Stopping the line isn't a cost, it's the mechanism that produces reliability. It's the reason the car starts every morning. But here's what took every competitor years to understand, and most still haven't. You can install the cord, you cannot install what makes people pull it. Ford learned this firsthand. GM ran a full joint venture with Toyota in California in the 1980s, watched every process from the inside, documented everything, went home and rebuilt what they'd seen. It helped, but it never fully translated, because what they observed was the surface, the scheduling, the boards, the cord on the wall. What they couldn't take home was the reason anyone pulls it. A deeply held belief at every level of the organization that stopping is always better than letting something through. You can copy the mechanism. You cannot copy what makes people trust it enough to use it. And that conviction didn't come from a consultant. It didn't come from a business school. It came from a loom that stopped itself in 1924 because a carpenter's son decided machines shouldn't keep running when something goes wrong. The results aren't subtle. Toyota consistently tops long-term reliability studies. Not occasionally, but year after year. The 2008 financial crisis required government bailouts to save GM and Chrysler. Toyota came through without one. None of that is a product story. None of it traces back to a revolutionary design or a marketing campaign. It traces back to fewer defects compounding, fewer faults reaching the customer. Other manufacturers build impressive cars, faster, more luxurious, more ambitious. But Toyota builds cars that work, consistently. It was never about manufacturing. Toyota's answer has been the same since before they made a single car. And looking back, it was never about cars. It was about what you do the moment something goes wrong. Toyota decided that answer before they ever built a single car.